Welcome back to the Broadman Word, and we are um, going to get into another breakdown of a book or a life. But today, since it is the end of the week for me at least, when it comes to the Broadman Word, since it's Thursday, I do want to take a look at just one thing specific. And it was actually from a podcast that I listened to called Pastors Talk through Nine Marks, and they were talking with a couple, a pastor and his wife, about hospitality and what that means in the Christian life, but in the church as well. And I thought that would be something that would be really, really interesting to talk about here on the Broadman Word as well. So, what does hospitality look like when it comes to the life of the believer and the workings of the church? Well, first off, what does hospitality mean exactly? The dictionary basically says the friendly and generous reception and entertainment of guests, visitors, or strangers. And we kind of see that in Scripture. The word hospitality shows up 4 times in the New Testament, all in the New Testament. There's one in Romans, First Timothy, Hebrews, and then First Peter. So let's look at those 4 verses and see what we can kind of get from them. So Romans chapter 12, verse 13, contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. So in doing hospitality, in being friendly and generous and receiving and entertaining guests, you are contributing to the needs of the saints. So hospitality is not just something that you do to encourage, but it is something that you can do to meet the needs of your fellow brothers and sisters. And that doesn't necessarily mean entertainment or food or giving them something to drink at your house, but it could just mean seeing them, letting them grieve over the loss of their loved one, or letting them grieve over the loss of their job, or celebrating with them over over a promotion, or celebrating with them over the birth of a son or daughter, or a grandson or a granddaughter. So it's not just about entertaining, but it's about encouragement. But it's not just about encouragement, but it's meeting the needs of those within your church and within your life. But something that I thought was really interesting when it comes to the podcast was the use of hospitality as a witness tool to unbelievers, or as scripture puts it, strangers. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 2. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. Now, there's a point where you could say, okay, can't strangers mean believers that you don't know? Yes, I totally understand. I totally get that. But it could be that you're also referencing unbelievers. Now, here, I do believe that that the author of Hebrews is referencing believers that you don't know, because obviously making the connection with strangers and angels, obviously that is for those that believe in God, right? So but when it comes to strangers, obviously this can very much relate to those that are unbelievers. Now, don't get me wrong, that makes it more interesting when it comes to using hospitality as a witness tool. And I think what that means is it's not like this. Basically, you get them in the door and you're like, now you're mine. It's not like that at all. We're not in the hostage the hostage evangelism game. That's not what I mean by it. Basically, what hospitality to unbelievers, what that looks like is, look, I even if they know that you are a believer, just having them over to your home, opening up your home to them, and then making it aware that you are there in their community and you are willing to sit down and have a conversation with them. You are willing to listen to them, and that means quite a lot. And um, the couple that were on the podcast just really kind of just backed that up. And there were times where I think they were in a hurricane zone, but they would have people come from even if their city didn't get hit by a hurricane, but the surrounding cities did, they would have somebody come over to their house, and or they would have their home open to serve meals to these surrounding communities. So stuff like that, that is kind of what hospitality to strangers or unbelievers looks like. And I think that's really, really interesting. Now, there is a level to it that is extremely important that we hold on to, and that is how we go about hospitality. It's not just this idea of, oh, now I have to open my house, like, so now I'm gonna have to clean this and make sure the kids' rooms are good. And oh my gosh, like, sounds like so much work. And don't get me wrong, like, it is, but Peter kind of tackles this. So First Peter chapter 4, verse 9. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. Oh, it's really easy to show hospitality on the outside, but internally, you are not hospitable. You are like, oh my gosh, like, oh, there are so many things wrong, or so many things going on that, oh, I just don't have time, or I don't have the means to do this. And there are, and don't get me wrong, obviously there are certain situations that you need to spend time with your family, with your spouse, um, with your loved ones, that you need time to yourself and to those around in your immediate circle or family. Totally get that. And the couple that was on this podcast definitely talked about this. And there is a good healthy balance that you have to find. But there is this tendency with hospitality where it becomes more of a chore and more about the work of getting ready to be hospitable, that makes you just go kind of, well, it just makes you miserable. And I think the one person that I think of in scripture is Martha. And she was so focused on being hospitable to Jesus and to his disciples and to others that were in the home, that she forgot to actually spend time with the people that were in the home. Whereas Mary, yes, she could have been maybe a little bit more helpful, but she understood that once the folks that are there, especially Jesus being there, right? She understood the importance of spending time with people and being hospitable to people in that way. Whereas Martha was just so worried about all of the things that she could do that it brought down her mood and just made it more like a chore than anything else. And so Jesus brought her back into, look, yes, there is obviously a lot of setup that goes into being hospitable, but another level of being hospitable is meeting people where they are. And you can't do that with a grumbling manner or a grumbling attitude, because you can definitely set things up with hospitality on the outside, but you can't be hospitable and meeting them where they're at if you are trying to be hospitable while grumbling internally. So that's something that I found really, really interesting with this conversation. The other one is First Timothy 5. And there's a little bit more context here. Verse 9, let a widow be enrolled if she is not less than 60 years of age, having been the wife of one husband, and having a reputation for good works. If she has brought up children, has shown hospitality, has washed the feet of the saints, has cared for the afflicted, and has devoted herself to every good work. In First Timothy chapter 5, the part of that is just talking about instructions for the church that Timothy is most likely the pastor of. But you can tell that hospitality is a really big, it's a really important character quality that we look for in not just church leaders, but within church members. And so I think that's really, really important to see that hospitality should not just be done by the leaders in your church, but it should be done by every single member of the church. Now, again, that doesn't mean that 365, 24/7, you have to have people in your house. I'm not saying that, but just having the openness to do that, that's what hospitality is. And that's what Christian hospitality is. Now, the wife of this, the pastor's wife of this podcast, she did write a book about this. I think it's an incredibly good book. It is called The Gospel Comes with a House Key by Rosaria Butterfield. And the little subscript about it, practicing radically ordinary hospitality in our post-Christian world. Her testimony is incredible. She came to know Jesus mainly because of the hospitality of a couple of believers in a church in her area. And the fact that they were willing to open their home to her, willing to talk through faith and what it means to be a follower of Jesus. That's really what helped her get to the point where she gave her life to the Lord. And so hospitality, yes, it may take some time, but it is so, so worth it. So if you can get a copy of The Gospel Comes with a House Key by Rosaria Butterfield, definitely do it. It is worthwhile. So with that, thank you for just spending a little bit of time today with me talking about hospitality in the church, what that looks like, why it's important, and then what it means for the life of the believer and our personal evangelism as well. So we will get back at it next week with the Brahmin Word. But thanks for spending time with me today.